Hello, and welcome to the first video of the Animating for Kaneva series. My name's Robert. Some of you may know me as Zuka on the Kaneva forums and in Kaneva. We're going to cover a couple of things today, but we're not going to get into animating just yet. This is because there's some important things you need to know. If you already know these things, such as where to get OpenColada, installing it, having the animation template handy, perhaps using Blender, as might be your tool of choice since it is free. The basics of 30 frames per second, looping animations, and actually bringing everything into Kaneva, then you can go ahead and skip to the next video. Now, if you're still here, we're going to be covering everything I just mentioned. First, we're going to look at OpenColada. You need to have OpenColada in order to import into Kaneva. Now, if you're using Blender, you actually don't need to download OpenColada. It's actually part of Blender automatically, so that's pretty handy. Now, we use 3ds Max 2008 here at Kaneva, so we do need to get the OpenColada tools to bring it into Kaneva. As you can see, 2008 is a little bit of an older version. Maya is another software you can use that has OpenColada support. Just be sure you have a version of Maya that it allows. In this case, I'm using OpenColada for 3ds Max, which is the 2008 edition, specifically the 64-bit on Windows. The other thing you'll need is to get to the designers area of docs.kaneva.com. In there, you will see a section for emotes, and it's under personalizing avatars. Go to that section and download both the male animation template and the female animation template. You will need both of them to provide quality animation. Once these have downloaded and you have extracted them and put them somewhere where you're going to work, you can open one up. Now, there's some default stuff on there that's kind of a little silly, as you can see, but we're not worrying about that right now. What we're worrying about is why the number 300 is down here, and when I play it, it seems to take a really long time to get there. There's 30 frames per second. This is what Kaneva uses. This is what a lot of games use. Some games have gone now to 60 frames per second. This is a little bit of the newer thing, but Kaneva knows 30 frames per second for importing. So what this means is that from here to 60, here is 2 seconds, and you can play that and see 1, 2, that's 2 seconds. So keep that in mind while you're working. You don't want to accidentally make your animations too short or too long, and just playing the animation over and over again and looking at it and making sure it all comes out right is very good to do. Something that you want to keep in mind while animating for game engines generally is looping animations. Now, animations can loop. You can just say 0 to 60 and loop. I'm going to use Control-Alt here and right-click to modify my timeline. Control-Alt left-click will also modify the timeline, and so will Control-Alt middle-click. Be careful when moving the timeline around, as I have had Max crash on me when the current time gets pushed around. So just an example, just to show you looping as it works period the end. I'm just going to play it, and you'll see, it comes right back to the beginning. That's great and all, but when you're actually working with your keyframes, you want to probably leave a good 30, maybe even 60 frame gap depending on your animation, so that way when it does loop, it's not choppy. You may have noticed that certain animations, when they loop, you can tell exactly where they loop because there's a little skip, there's a little hop. To avoid this, I have some space in front and some space at the end, and what that'll let me do is copy some of the frames from the middle over the ends of the animation. What this allows is for the data essentially to transition really smoothly from the end point back to the beginning point. When you're exporting for Kaneva, you actually need to be very careful about trimming your timeline. Say it starts at 60 and it ends at 180, and you don't really care about these extra frames because the numbers are all nice. Be sure to do OpenColada, not Lightscape blocks, OpenColada and say it's, some animation. Save it. Uh, you want to use copy images, relatives, paths, and triangulate normals, and enable export for animation. Really, as far as animation is concerned, you only actually need the exporting the animation. These are really just handy in general for exporting stuff to Kaneva. But do not sample your animation. Do not say bring it from 60 to 180 and start end that, because it won't import quite right because of the way that the cropping of that animation is defined. So just export the whole animation. Hit OK. Now your whole range is exported. Be careful that you don't crop it off on the end. You want to see everything. Control Alt right click again. As you can see, there are some frames, and if you don't have them visible, actually exporting will cut them off. So that's another gotcha with Max and the Open Collada thing. Now going back over to Kaneva, we go to build mode, open up the creator toolbox, and you can click emotes, or alternately you can actually grab the file directly and just drag it onto the character. Either way works, animation in this case. As you can see, we have our animation here. As you can see, it's 10 seconds, even though we had more frames, and that's because the export kind of chopped it off a bit. It loops by default. Sometimes you don't need it, most of the times you do. The starting and ending time is in milliseconds, so there's 1,000 milliseconds per second and 30 frames per second. So if you want to skip the first 2 seconds, you want to skip the first 2,000, and you can kind of see down here how it cuts it. But that will, say I started my animation on 60 frames, and that's where I really want it to start. And then you have the end frame where it actually ends, and then you would just hit next, and then you can upload it and all that. I'm not going to do that because that's just the default animation. So that's the basics of, things you need to know, be aware of, in terms of getting good animations and bringing things into Kaneva. Next video, we're actually going to start covering animating. We're actually going to animate specifically for the battle template. So we're going to be animating with different types of weapons in hands and kind of covering the different things that you can do to help make things easier when you're, going from standing to running and walking and jumping and all these different ones and keeping the hands in the same place. So I will see you there.